State Senator Liz Mathis, thanks for joining us for another edition of Beyond the Podium. It's great to be doing these in person again.
Yes, it is. Isn't it great? It's good to see you, too.
Thank you. I want to begin with inflation. Continues to be the #1 problem on the minds
Yes.
of voters. Very few not directly impacted because it affects everything we choose to buy or things that we have to pay for. Why do Democrats deserve to continue to lead on Capitol Hill after initially calling this problem a short-term issue and seemingly not getting anything done that's putting a dent in it?
Well, let's take a look at inflation first of all. So we know that gas prices are high, and we know that consumer prices are high, like in the grocery store when you're buying. A lot of people are buying things and then saying, is this all I got, right? So I understand that. I grew up on a farm. My mom and dad worked really hard, and nothing was ever given to them, or nothing was ever given to me either. So I get it. I get what people are going through. So, okay, so what's the solution? So we're coming off of COVID. We have Russia invading Ukraine. Inflation is a problem all over the globe. So we have to think of it globally. So domestically, the Biden administration reduced gas prices by issuing E15 across the country. And we immediately saw, a lowering of gas prices. We need to keep drilling. We need to keep drilling on our own land. And we need to release barrels of oil from the reserve. And they decided to do that. 1 million barrels of oil is being released along the Gulf Coast. And so that's aiding in the drilling. And the Biden administration has to step up and talk to OPEC. They have to get tough on OPEC because gas prices drive everything. How our groceries get to the store, how everything is delivered to our homes. And that is increasing prices and in turn passing the price along. And then all of a sudden you have to pay the bill. So I totally get that. We know that we can reduce prices in Medicare and Social Security. Medicare for sure, because we just saw inflation, the Inflation Recovery Act, Reduction Act, passed. And the Inflation Reduction Act says that insulin will be capped at $35. In fact, it's capped right now, so it started immediately. And we know that we can negotiate for prescription drug prices. That's going to bring prices down and it's going to reduce the debt. We know that just generally, premiums on the marketplace are going to lower, and that is something that Senator Grassley and Dianne Feinstein said they would do, and it never got done. It's finally done. So there are a number of things that we can do to reduce prices. Ashley Hinson voted against the price gouging bill, and that was to eliminate price gouging primarily of big oil. She has accepted a lot of money from big oil.
What do you say to those that say, and the oil companies themselves that say, we need to drill more and we're not being allowed to do that?
Mm-hmm. I think they should be allowed to do that, drill, because we grow corn and corn turns in, we go to ethanol plants and turn it into ethanol and it's mixed. So we know that it would benefit Iowans. It would benefit Iowa corn farmers, and then along the way it passes on to the consumer. So it would be good for all of us.
Your opponent, who you just mentioned, Congresswoman Hinson, coincidentally also worked as a journalist like yourself for many years, says you will be just another guaranteed vote for President Biden and Speaker Pelosi. No question both are unpopular here in Iowa. So is there a policy that they're either pushing or enacted that you don't believe in, that you would actually not be a yes vote for them?
Well, first of all, I want to talk about the differences between Congresswoman Hinson and myself. Big differences, even though we were both broadcast journalists. I grew up on a farm. A lot of people don't know that. My parents were World War II veterans and came home to farm. My mom was a cadet nurse. She went through the cadet corps when they needed healthcare professionals, and then she became the town doctor's nurse. So they worked really hard on the farm, and they worried about the weather a lot. And I worked hard too. I did chores. I had cattle. I pulled pigs in a farrowing operation. When that last piglet had to come out, that was me. I know that sounds really gross, but that's what I did. I detasseled corn, and I learned how to drive on a 4020 John Deere tractor. And then I saved up my money from detasseling, and I went to school at the University of Iowa, majored in journalism. I met my husband, Mark, there, and we got married and had 2 great kids. I had a very successful career in broadcast journalism here in Northeast Iowa, so I got my start here. at Channel 2. It was WMT-TV at the time, and I was running camera for the Dr. Max and Mambo show. And whenever I say that to crowds, oh my gosh, reminisce about Dr. Max for a while. But I did, I worked here for a couple of years through college, then took my first job at KWWL and was the first female news anchor on the evening news. Came back to Cedar Rapids, worked at Wartburg College for a while, came back to Cedar Rapids to really redesign a blueprint for KCRG of what the new newsroom looks like with 24/7 news. I worked there for about 9 years, and then I decided that it was time to leave journalism. I had done every story twice. So I went off to Four Oaks, which is a mental health facility for young children, and I learned a lot. The most I learned was that people weren't saying the word children when they were doing their stump speeches or talking. Legislators weren't talking about children. And the second thing was that not enough money, not enough attention was going into children's mental health. I went to an appropriations meeting where they talked about adult mental health for about an hour and children's mental health for 10 minutes. And I thought, okay, if we could switch this and invest in children, then we would have more successful adults in as they grow and as they become adults. So there are a lot of things that are different about Ashley Hinson and me. I want to go to Washington because I want to help families lower their costs, just what we were talking about. I want to work on that, and I want to make sure that they feel good about living in Iowa. We don't want people to move away. I want to make sure that we strengthen and protect Medicare and Social Security. It has to be there. It is a social safety net for so many people. And lastly, I want to protect women's reproductive rights. And that is absolutely one thing that I want to do, codify Roe. And the other part of that is certainly improve maternal mental health care and improve mental health care in our rural areas.
I'm going to come back to abortion in just a second, but you've mentioned several times you grew up on a farm.
Yes.
That's a sector of Iowa's population that for almost a decade now, Democrats have really struggled to get any ground on here in Iowa.
Yeah.
Why is that, and what makes your message better connect with them than the last several years for the state party?
Well, I can't really tell you what the answer is for that and why, we see more people in the rural areas, as Republicans. But we got to get out there, and we've got to do our work. I traveled to 14 county fairs. I met a lot of farmers. I'm a good fit for this district because I came from a farm, so I know about farming. My dad was the first no-till farmer in 1972 in Clinton County. He went to some ISU training, and he decided, he came home and he wanted to try it because it was about his soil. He wanted to preserve his soil. He didn't want it to run off. We had a stream that ran through our farm, and he didn't want that to run off. He wanted to see if he could improve yield, so it was beans rotating to corn and back to beans over a 3-year period. He really got to see, got to see a lot of improvement. So I understand what goes on in the farm. I went to the Hardin County Fair, and the Howard County Fair, and there was, the head of the GOP there, and he said, wow, we haven't seen a Democratic candidate for Congress here in 20 years. And I said, here I am. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I lead a watershed management, organization. And I said, fill me in, tell me what's going on. I want to know what's going on. And so we had a really pleasant conversation. It's those kinds of conversations that have to happen. And to make that happen, we need to put farmers at the head of the table when we're talking about anything that affects their livelihood. I think that might be part of it, that farmers feel like they're not heard. We are an ag state. We produce corn and beans and, cattle and hogs, and that's what we do. We absolutely do that. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the exports that we provide for the rest of the world.
Barring a dramatic upset here in Iowa, Republicans are poised to continue control of state politics. I know that's not what you're running for.
Right.
But by all accounts, they're planning on passing major restrictions on abortion, if not an outright ban. If this issue is so important as we keep hearing that it is, why are Iowans still voting for Republicans?
Well, I just want everybody to know that I am the candidate that protects women's rights, reproductive rights, and health care rights. If you're pro-choice, vote for me. But I tell you what, we need to protect women in all of this. We need to protect young women. In one stroke of the pen, the Supreme Court took my daughter from being a first-class citizen to a second-class citizen. Ashley Hinson has signed on to a bill in Congress that would outlaw abortion for everyone in the United States with no exceptions for the life of the mother or for rape or for incest. I just don't agree with that. I don't believe that government should be involved in my healthcare decisions or anybody else's, especially my daughter and my daughter's daughter.
Congresswoman Miller Meeks also supports one of the 15-week ban proposed by Senator Graham that does include exceptions. She says the answer to all this for women is contraception. What do you say to that?
Well, I agree with that too. It's not the be-all and end-all, but there was a great bill in front of Congress, access to contraceptives, and Ashley Hinson voted against that as well. She put up a bill that would, she could tell everybody that she had voted on something. She created her own bill. But really, people can see through that. And the issue really is, Oregon has this great program. It's called One Question. And when women of reproductive age come into the office, the primary care physician says, do you plan to be pregnant in the next year? And if the answer is yes, great prenatal vitamins, here's your prescription for prenatal, away you go, be happy and healthy baby. If you don't, then here are the standards around sexually transmitted diseases. Here is a contraceptive that you could use. So you're working in tandem with the woman who is of reproductive age in trying to find the best solution for her over by the time that she comes back in the next checkup. So I agree partly with Marinette Miller Meeks. In fact, she ran a bill that was to do that very thing in the state Senate, and I agreed fully with her.
Also, with regards to your time in the state Senate, one of the big criticisms among Republicans about you is that you voted against ending state taxes on retirement. You voted against the recent passage of a flat tax that's now being rolled out over several years. Mm-hmm. Why?
Okay, yeah, my record is being stretched. It's being altered a little bit here. I think everybody knows that we had a commercial property tax cut a few years ago, and we, cut 10% of the sales or the property tax bill to the state. And then we offered backfill to cities so that they could make up for the amount that we cut and that wouldn't be passed on to you as a property tax owner. So I was very proud to sign on to that bill. We saw economic growth. We saw differences in the amount of businesses that wanted to locate here in Iowa. And we wanted that to accelerate, and it has. The other thing, I voted on increasing the earned income tax credit, and that's mostly for middle-class families. They really appreciate being able to put a few dollars in their pocket during tax time, that they can file for this tax credit, and they're going to get a little bit of money back. And thirdly, I voted against the gas tax increase. So I voted against a tax increase because I just thought that at the time, 10 cents a gallon was going to be really hard on people. I know that because I grew up on a farm and things were hard. And so 10 cents a gallon is a lot of money. I voted against it. I also voted with the Republicans on the inheritance tax, that we were going to repeal the inheritance tax. And on that same bill that was in the Senate, I voted to release sales tax triggers. That bill went over to the House, excuse me, and it was loaded up. It was an omnibus tax bill that came back our way. And what was in it was a cut to backfill to cities, which I don't want your property tax driven up. And it was also, there was also a piece in there about how mental health care would be paid. And it was going to be paid with sales tax. You look at the sales tax pie and how many different entities are receiving sales tax to get by, and that's a problem. If we can't agree on making sure that our mental health care is paid for and there is, they have something to depend on each year, that's really difficult. We're already suffering with the mental health care that we have. You know, providers they have to get in there and they have to beg every year, you know, for increases, and that's wrong. So I didn't agree with that. In terms of the flat tax, I think it's going to affect the middle class. I don't think they're getting a fair break. It's not proportionate with those who make a lot of money.
Excuse me, I need to clear my throat too. Just a yes or no answer. I promise there's a follow-up here. Do you support President Biden's plan for student debt reduction?
Not right now. I don't. And here's why. I think that it alleviates a lot of problem for a lot of people who have debt right now. It alleviates it right now. What happens after that? And what happened to the people before that? You know, what's fair? The word fair is a word that I used when I was in journalism, a word that I used in children's mental health care, and a word that I used while I was in the Iowa State Senate for 10 years. Excuse me, Nick. And I just didn't think that, that was fair. They have to look at the higher cost of tuition. That's a huge element in all of this.
Is that a federal issue though, or is that a state issue?
Oh no, you can look at it federally and you can look at it statewide. Legislators increase the Iowa tuition grant. And so I have voted to increase the Iowa tuition grant many times. And I have encouraged parents to fill out FAFSA forms, you know, and to make sure that they know what help is out there. And there is a lot of help out there. But really, we need to reduce the cost of tuition. There were 100 colleges that just announced that they would help students not have any debt load, and they would find them either aid or they would get them scholarships and try to cobble together something so that they won't have debt.
Your opponent recently said in an interview that you, quote, and I'm quoting here, want to talk about being a woman's candidate when she finds it a tough question to define what a woman is. What's your response to that?
Yeah, what a woman is someone who protects women's rights. And Ashley Hinson has voted against the Violence Against Women's Act. She voted against the ERA. That was up. And people have been fighting for that for years. And she voted against equal pay for equal work. And she voted against access to contraceptives. And she sponsored a bill, co-sponsored a bill, that would outlaw abortion for everyone in the United States with no exceptions to the life of the mother and for rape or incest. How is that protecting women? It's not.
You spent several years at the State House.
Mm-hmm.
You've been there as it has become redder and redder and redder.
Yes.
That is a reflection of the state of Iowa. What needs to change for your party and your values, your opinions to change that? Because without changing that, Democrats are going to continue to lose power both at the state and federal level here in Iowa. In fact, there are some pollsters who believe it will be a clean red sweep this November.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say to them that if you look at the registrations in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd districts, Democrats lead in voter registration. And so we need to make sure that we turn out the vote.
And there are a lot of independents too, though, and
Sure,
Democrats
yeah.
have not been winning them over recently.
Yes, absolutely. Excuse me about this. But we have to, you know, make sure that we are reducing costs for people, that we're protecting, you know, Medicare and Social Security, that we're protecting reproductive rights. These are the things that people want us to pay attention to. And we're looking at the farmer, and we're looking at the people who, you know, produce goods and services, economic development, and things like veterans issues. We have to be on our game. We have to make sure that we're listening first and foremost, and that we take action from that listening and the needs that people have across the state of Iowa. We take action.
Well, we will certainly be watching the results as they come in November 8th. State Senator Liz Mathis, thanks for joining us for Beyond the Podium.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it.